Namaskar and welcome to our weekly program on news related to geoeconomics from an Indian perspective. And on the program today, the US President's 50% tariff imposition on India for trade with Russia is resolutely responded to by India as unfair, unjustified and unreasonable, since the US itself trades with Russia. The Trump tariff regime is increasing housing costs, slowing the US economy, and increasing unemployment, putting the American dream in trouble, say experts. India celebrates the sacred bond between brothers and sisters. Traders too build a bond of their own with the festival. Well, before we move on, let's listen to Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressing India's resoluteness in constantly defending the interests of India's farmers, especially at a time when pressure is being brought on India to allow greater market access in these sectors. India also protects the interests of farmers by keeping the input costs down.
हमारे लिए अपने किसानों का हित सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता है। भारत अपने किसानों के, पशुपालकों के और मछुआरे भाई बहनों के हितों के साथ कभी भी समझौता नहीं करेगा। और मैं जानता हूं, व्यक्तिगत रूप से मुझे बहुत बड़ी कीमत चुकानी पड़ेगी, लेकिन मैं इसके लिए तैयार हूं। आज भारत तैयार है।
Well, indeed. So let's take a look now at what the US has done, US tariffs on India. The US has doubled tariffs on India to 50% because of the penalties also for oil and defense purchases from Russia. But we know that India has hit back at the United States because what has happened is that these imports that India said officially that these imports are to ensure predictability and affordable energy costs for India. After all, we are dealing with 1.4 billion people, and there is a necessity which has also been compelled by the global market situation. And we also know, as in the first response that India gave soon after the Trump administration had announced those prices, that the EU and the US are also trading with Russia. In fact, the EU, their trade in goods itself with Russia is to the order of about $67 billion. Then they also trade in services, which is to the order of about 17.2 billion euros. Now, Europe and Russia, they also have trade beyond energy because it's also in fertilizers, in mining, in chemicals, iron, steel, machinery. But let's come to the US. The US is importing, in fact, uranium hexafluoride. This is for their nuclear industry. And then there is palladium. This is for the upcoming EV industry, which is taking root and growing rapidly. And then there is fertilizers, which are basically meant for their agricultural sector. You have to that too it's a form of a subsidy in a sense, so they're getting that from Russia. And then there are chemicals. If we look at what the US leader of the Republican Party, Nikki Haley, who was in the first Trump administration, she worked as their UN representative to the United Nations. She said that India should not be buying oil from Russia, but she said that China, who's an adversary to the United States, is seen as an adversary, the #1 buyer of Russian oil and Iranian oil, got a 90-day tariff pause. So she says that the US should not be giving China a pass and burn their relationship with a strong ally like India. That's what Nikki Haley said. But let's look at the economic reasons why India is doing this once again. We see that the economic reasons are that there is a 14%, it's 14% cheaper, than West Asian oil because the Russians were giving us a discount, and that saved India $88.2 billion in the year 2024, a huge saving. And also, India was able to refine these products, the crude, into diesel and jet fuel for export and make high margins. So obviously, it made good business sense to be buying oil from Russia. Apart from that, there are other economic reasons. Of course, India's strategic autonomy is very important. India has to take its own decisions. And apart from that, India already gives its own refiners the freedom to make decisions. So that is part of India's larger strategic autonomy as far as oil imports and exports are concerned. And India helps, also because of these purchases in keeping prices stable. Global oil price stability is an important component, not only for India, but for the entire global South. Let's take a look now at what the US president has done. The US President Donald Trump had announced on Wednesday that Apple will be investing an additional $100 billion in the United States. Now, this move is going to expand the company's domestic investment commitment to about $600 billion. But we must remember, what does Apple do? Apple is exporting iPhones from India to the United States. Let's listen.
Well, I hate to use the word bribe, but I'll just put it out there. So what's interesting is two things. First, there was no mention that these investments would be in producing manufacturing goods, right? We heard about AI investments. We heard about other things, but we didn't hear, let's produce iPhones in the US. And so there's this big investment being made. And at the same time, what's happening is that Trump's tariffs are actually going to exclude iPhones being imported into the US. So if you import an iPhone from China, you're not being hit by these very high tariffs. And if you import an iPhone from India, we just heard that they also will not receive tariffs. So it's the timing is a little suspicious, but it looks like as a result of this extra $100 billion, there will not be tariffs imposed on imported smartphones.
Okay, that's one of the interpretations. And we are joined by Vice Chancellor of Nalanda University, from Nalanda, by the eminent economist, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Now, do you see these tariffs give India also an opportunity, in a sense, to diversify trade routes? And if we look at it from the US's point of view, has the US president been caught in some sort of an echo chamber and is missing the wood for the trees?
Absolutely right, Mark. This has given us a major opportunity to diversify. It has given up the idea in terms of focusing only on the Eurocentric trade strategy, which of course in last 6 to 7 years, we have tried to diversify. And thanks to the leadership's emphasis in terms of free trade agreements, Commerce Ministry has changed, and we have seen that how the moratorium that was going on since 2007 on FTAs has evolved since 2018, when we saw the first FTA signed with Mauritius, and after that series of FTAs which have been signed by India with multiple countries. And at this point, as Commerce Minister reported the other way, with 26 countries, we have initiated free trade agreement discussions. So this is extremely heartening and encouraging. What we need to do is to consolidate our work in terms of how in Africa, Latin America, where India has huge interest in partnership in terms of bringing the rare earth minerals and also trying to see the markets for our semi-finished goods. So this part, I think, is extremely important.
Okay.
What we need to realize in case of US, you are right, some bit of, I think, realization of India-US partnership for strategic purposes, I think is extremely important. It is important that we do not forget the idea of India-US compact, the $500 billion trade target that was identified. People are saying that PM did not speak, but Prime Minister was the first one to visit US and assure in terms of India's partnership with the United States. So I think at most clarity is there in terms of India's possible partnership with the US. Our idea of India-US compact gives us the leeway in terms of how the two big democracies can be beneficial. There are multiple sort of efforts by many other countries who are extremely keen to create more challenges between India-US partnership. I hope President and the team would realize the great global significance. It's not just
Indeed,
bilateral
absolutely.
part. It is global,
absolutely.
public good, I would say,
Indeed,
that India-US partnership would
Professor
provide
Chaturvedi,
stability
I mean,
to trade.
is the US stand, likely to change also? Because there is a likely meeting between the US president and the Russian president likely to happen. But they also have an understanding with Russia. They are trading with Russia. So after all, the US is, trading with a deficit also with Russia. It may not be a large amount, but they are importing fertilizers meant for agriculture. And, most of all, whatever we import is also, I mean, the basic aim is to see that our input costs in agriculture remain low.
Exactly. And I think earlier in your report, you were mentioning about strategic autonomy, which I think is the key word for all the countries. And is so for India, it is for US, but is also true for Russia. So the idea that others can deal with Russia and India's Russia import would be viewed with certain glasses is not correct. And I think we need a greater balancing of our bilateral partnership, our trade relationship. US-Russia trade has multiplied. If you recall, when US suspended SWIFT for Russia, that time 6 banks from Germany and France, they were doing digital transactions with Russia. So to threaten public sector enterprises from India and to block digital payment architecture for Russia, it hasn't helped anyone. And in fact, other countries have taken advantage in the region. So it is important that
Professor
strategic
Chaturvedi,
importance is realized.
Do stay with us for our next story, which is also on the United States. Now, the US president's tariff regime, in theory, it's expected to bring in more balanced trade in the US. But so far, indicators suggest that the economy is not taking the disruptions too well. Growth is stagnant, unemployment is rising, and the American dream is getting harder for the average American, especially the Gen Z crowd.
US President Trump's sweeping tariffs in 2025 have made it harder for middle-class Americans to fulfill the American dream. Tariffs on steel, lumber, and copper are expected to drive up construction costs, inflating home prices and making down payments harder for first-time buyers.
I would say about 60% of Americans do not participate in any increase in economic growth. 80% of Americans have the same household income, adjusted for inflation, that it was in 1973. And there's been, the economy's grown by about 200%. So that's a very serious drag on the US economy.
Import duties on auto parts and raw materials will raise vehicle prices, pushing buyers toward longer loans or used cars. US GDP growth has slowed to 1.8% annually, well below the 3% to 4% that Trump had promised. The tariffs in general are expected to push inflation up later in the year.
It'll mainly affect US trade, and it will increase the price on an average basis when these are fully implemented, and that takes time. But they will increase the average price of imports purchased by Americans by probably around 15%. That's a pretty big increase, and that will show up in inflation later this year.
Real wages are below inflation, squeezing household budgets, and job creation has fallen short of expectations. Unemployment rate in July rose slightly to 4.2%, continuing a trend of stagnation since early 2024.
Unemployment is low at 4.2%, but if you include part-time workers that want full-time work and also people that are working jobs that don't meet their degree attainment, that number goes up, the U6 measure, to 8% unemployment, which is, quite high. But the real problem is 25% of Americans, whether they're working for full-time or not, make less than $25,000 a year.
Supporters argue the pain is temporary and necessary to reshore manufacturing and reduce trade deficits. But so far, manufacturing output has declined and the trade deficit has widened. So while the American dream isn't dead, it's definitely more expensive and for many more elusive. The Economic Brief, DD India.
Well, Professor Chaturvedi continues to grace us with his presence. Professor Chaturvedi, do you see the middle class in the US, especially Gen Z, struggling and losing hope of the American dream?
See, this is going to multiply as far as US-India trade is concerned. And let me bring some numbers to you. If you see the trade basket that is there, almost 12% of India's exports to US is of pharmaceutical products. Pharmaceutical products as at this point are out, but quite a few companies are importing chemicals, which are again 12%, and they are somewhere close to $9 billion, where they are doing value addition and then making them available as pharmaceuticals in the local market. All of that would be affected. We are already having some $15 billion export of almost 19% of electrical goods, which are also extremely cost effective. And what Fed has already warned is a huge escalation in domestic prices, inflation. And this they are expecting that would happen as soon as second week of September. And this
Indeed.
is the second warning that has come from Fed. So what we are expecting is in terms of tariff spillovers, but also squeezed space in terms of how the new jobs would be created. The countries who are getting affected are also imposing. Brazil has imposed. And you see the major trade basket for US is Brazil. Now Brazil has also retaliated and has come up with tariffs. China retaliated.
Indeed, but Professor Chaturvedi, looking at it from the US point of view, I mean, is their economy going to turn around at all if these policies work in reshoring manufacturing, and how long will it take?
No, that's what I'm saying, that if retaliations are happening, US exports are also going to get affected. They are not going to be insulated. So what is going to happen to the exports of other countries to US at last would also happen to the exports from the US. And this would create a major export and import imbalance at the global level. So to think that exports are good and imports are bad is not correct in a world where we are ending up with 72% of global trade is value chains. It is in semi-finished products, it's parts and components. So you find that the trade baskets have changed and have evolved.
Indeed. We leave it there. Thank you very much, Professor Chaturvedi, for joining us, helping us to understand the impact of trade tariffs and how diversification also strengthens the global economy. Thanks for being with us, sir. Now, moving on to our next story, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert Kennedy Jr., he has announced the cancellation of federal contracts for mRNA vaccines. That's a technology widely credited with combating COVID-19 and saving millions of lives. Known for his controversial views on vaccines, Kennedy's latest decision is sparking intense debate within the medical community. What impact could this move have on the future of public health and vaccine development? Diptanshu Kashyap reports.
In a sweeping policy shift, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has terminated 22 federal contracts related to mRNA vaccine research and distribution, cutting nearly $500 million in funding. The contracts supported major pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer and Moderna, in developing vaccines for bird flu and other viruses. Scientists warn that the move could set back pandemic preparedness and stall the development of next generation vaccines.
After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risk than benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies.
The decision follows renewed controversy over the safety of mRNA vaccine platforms. Millions received mRNA based COVID 19 vaccines during the pandemic. However, critics have increasingly questioned the long term effects and the risks associated with repeated booster doses. These concerns have gained traction under Secretary Kennedy, a prominent vaccine skeptic who has ushered in sweeping reforms across vaccine, food, and drug policy. Among his most contentious actions, the dismissal of 17 members of the Federal Vaccine Advisory Committee and the removal of the COVID 19 vaccine from the CDC's immunization schedule for healthy children and pregnant women. Public health leaders warn such measures could erode public trust and weaken the nation's vaccine safety net. The fallout from the mRNA contract cancellations is already visible across the US health system. Leading voices from the Infectious Diseases Society of America to the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations say the move could stall research, hamper outbreak response, and deepen existing disparities, especially in underserved communities that rely heavily on federal vaccine programs. Critics warn that the move could widen the gap in global vaccine leadership and undermine future pandemic preparedness. Diptanshu Kashyap's report for the Economic Brief, DD India.
Well, India celebrates the unique festival of Raksha Bandhan, or the bond between a brother and a sister. Now, like most Indian festivals, this one too is an occasion for traders to develop unique products and adapt marketing strategies to maximize seasonal profits. Anu Kaushik checks out what the traders are expecting from this festival, and we leave you with her report. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.
Rakhi or Raksha Bandhan is not just a celebration of the bond between brothers and sisters, it also plays a significant role in boosting the economy. This year, the festival is estimated to have generated business worth Rs 21,000 crore. According to the Confederation of All India Traders, of the total 21,000 crore, sale of Rakhis alone accounts for 17,000 crore, while the sales of sweets, dry fruits, gift hampers, decorative items, clothing and puja materials account for the rest 4,000 crore. This is a remarkable rise when compared to the previous years. According to the traders' body, in 2024, Rakhi generated business worth Rs 12,000 crore. In 2023, the amount was Rs 10,000 crore, while in 2022, it was 7,000 crore. This increase in profit is evident in New Delhi markets where footfall has been substantial.
This year, we saw a rise in sales compared to last year. Customers have been purchasing Rakhis in bulk.
Although goods are available online, many shoppers prefer visiting stores in person with family to buy items for Rakhi due to its emotional importance.
Every Rakhi we come and shop lots of things, sweets, dry fruits, and all these things for our brothers. I've got two brothers. And gifts also for them. So that's why we are here in this shop.
Raksha Bandhan creates seasonal jobs. E-commerce platforms like Flipkart see increased orders for gifts in the run-up to Rakhi. As a family-focused festival, it also drives travel and hospitality as people visit their hometowns to celebrate with their loved ones. Those unable to travel often avail courier service to exchange Rakhis and gifts or use quick commerce sites like Blinkit and Zepto, which deliver goods in 10 minutes. The economic impact of Rakhi is multifaceted. It generates income for grassroots level craft persons while giving a fillip to sectors like e-commerce and retail.
With camera person Sunny Kalra, this is Annu Kaushik reporting for the Economic Brief, DD India.